What is going on, YouTube people? Today, we want to dive into Raw versus Gem Mint PSA 10 and how the gap between those two has dwindled, at least with ultra modern stuff. And it's really, I should say, Gem Mint, because this is not necessarily exclusive to a PSA 10. This is affecting everything on down the line. A PSA 10, an SGC 10, a BGS 95. It's just easier to show PSA 10s because they transact way more often. So typically, when you would get a raw card in your hand and you would send it in for grading, the norm, now there's going to be exceptions to the rules, and we're couching this conversation around modern slash ultra modern. So, not vintage and that crazy stuff. And there's always going to be weird exceptions like the Trevor Lawrence silver that has a print issue that skews things on one particular card. This is just generally speaking your modern to ultra modern card. Roughly, if you had nothing else to go off of, you would assume around 3x, give or take. It's not always perfect, but it would get you in the ballpark on what that card would sell for in a 10 versus raw. Once again, we were couching this around PSA. We talked about this on Off Centered, and recently I've noticed, and talking to other people, and Steve mentioned it, that gap, at least on ultra modern, is narrowing quite a bit. It's basically down to about 2x now from 3x, and this really seems to be centered around new releases mostly. I have a couple examples pulled up here. First up, the good old Victor Silver Prism. In a raw, it's going for about 500 bucks. In a PSA 10, it's going for just over 1,000, and there's plenty of sales right at or around 1,000. So you're basically sitting right at, they have it at 2.2x, and this is the ratio feature in Market Movers. It shows you the most recent ratio. So we see that at 2.2x, so basically 2x a raw versus PSA 10. Now, I don't want to get convoluted in the PSA 9s here, but in a lot of cases, raw is selling for more than PSA 9s on ultra modern stuff, which is an inverse as well. That is flipped around. They used to be about the same or a very slight premium on PSA 9s. But now on the ultra modern, like brand new releases from the last couple of years, that is not the case. 9s are outdoing or selling for way less, not way less, but a chunk less than raw. And that never used to be the case. So here's one example of the Wemby. Well, that just could be an outlier. Let's look at another one. CJ Stroud Silver Prism, PSA 10 versus raw. PSA 10 sitting right at about 800 bucks. Raw sitting right about 381-ish dollars. Look at the ratio, 2.1. So same thing, just a tick over 2x. How about another one? Bryce Young, same card, Silver Prism. PSA 10 going for 200. Raw going for about 80. Now in this case, a little wider. We're looking at about 2.4, 2.5x on that one. Now, let's take a step back and go back to just regular, I don't know where you want to classify this as, but not ultra modern as in releases from the last couple of years. Let's look at something slightly older. Luka Silver Prism, PSA 10 goes for right about 1.4K. Raw doing about 400. That is 3.5x. This is about what we would normally be looking for. How about another one? 2019 Ja Morant. PSA 10 going for 400. Raw going for 72. 5.5x. And then Zion, for comparison's sake, basically about the same, right around 5x as well. Now, why does the 2019 silvers, the Ja and the Zion, get such a X premium over the Luka? Well, the reason behind that one is we do need to bring the PSA 9s in the conversation. Here, the split between PSA 10 and PSA 9 is even. There are 2,300-ish 10s, 2,600-ish 9s. So very balanced. If we look at Ja, PSA 10s, 1,600, PSA 9s, 2,800. So way more 9s than 10s. So it's skewed the opposite direction, giving a more premium on the PSA 10. Zion, similar. 1,750 PSA 10s, 2,800 PSA 9s, giving that added edge to the 10 because of the way the pop count is skewing, which my theory is that is giving it the greater X multiplier over raw. So as we work backwards, that multiplier gets back to the normal 3 to 3.5. On brand new releases and stuff just coming out, it's regularly sitting at 2x. Now, will this hold? We don't know. That's the thing. Is this just a temporary thing because the product is newer? I mean, Prism Basketball's been out since January, so it's going on 4 or 5 months, but it hasn't even gone through like a 1-year rotation yet. Prism Football's been out for a hot minute, but not like forever. It's been out for a few months. Prices on these cards have basically settled for the most part. They're not going way up and way down. You know, when the release first comes out, there's crazy price swings. These have settled enough that we can, you know, make some assumptions based off where they currently sit at the moment. So what's causing this? Is it that the 10 Gem Mint top of grade is not maintaining the value that it once did? Or is it that people are paying stronger for raw? My gut tells me it's probably a little bit of both, and more so the latter, especially on new releases, because people want to chase that 10. It's one of the easiest things to do. Buy a card for 500, send it in the PSA, get a 10, get it back, and then double or triple your money. If you're good at it, it's one of the simplest things out there to do. It's raw to grade, and it's one of the backbones of, you know, you watch any, hey, how do I make money in sports cards? Raw to grade, raw to grade, raw to grade, raw to grade, raw to grade. It leaves you the most wiggle room. It gives you the most profit margin potentially. Way better than buying X player at a certain time, already graded, and then hopes and dreams that he turns into something better or something happens to spike his price. Now, you could still do that, but on established players, it's way trickier. If you're buying bargain basement guys and taking flyers on people, that's a little bit of a different story. But Wemby, clearly not that case. So I think what is driving this is the demand for clean raw, because people want to buy it to grade, and it is inflating that market. There's extra demand out there to buy this stuff to send it into grade. My theory is as we move further from release and as things get more settled and more clean raw is hitting the market, that gap may widen back out again. Because the raw that's going to get recycled, you know, if you're looking, I'll give you a perfect example. If someone walked up to you with a Luka Silver Raw Prism Silver from 2018, you're going to side-eye that thing 8 ways from Sunday, because why hasn't that card already been graded 5 times by now? Like, why is that card still sitting raw? Now, is there exceptions? Maybe someone just pulled it. Sure. Maybe someone had it in their collection from 5-6 years ago. Sure. But the odds of that are going to be slim to none. Maybe someone's just, I never graded cards and I always kept things in mags. Sure. Is that out there? Yeah, but it's few and far between. But a raw silver walks up to you and a Luka walks up to you from 2018, and you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna look at that thing and you're gonna be like, all right, what's wrong with it? That's your gut reaction is gonna be, what is wrong with this card? Because why isn't it in a slab? So you're already probably assuming that card is a PSA 8 walking up to you at best. At best, that card is a PSA 8. You're set up at a show, someone walks up to you with that, you're gonna look that thing over with a fine-tooth comb to try to determine why it already has not been graded, because that card's been in circulation for 6 years in theory. Now, a Stroud Silver, a Wemby Silver, a little bit of a different story. Someone could have just bought a box of that and ripped it. Someone could have just got that pack fresh. It may not have changed hands that much. Someone might not want to deal with grading that for one reason or the other. Maybe the person that got it opened a pack, they're not big on grading, and they just want to move it raw. They don't want to take the risk of getting a PSA 9 or an SGC 9 or an SGC 9.5 or a Beckett 9, whatever. They don't want to take that risk that it doesn't gem, because in the current state of things, if it doesn't gem, you're not even breaking even anymore. That's one of the other things that have kind of happened here. We mentioned it earlier. 9s are selling for less than raw. So if you send a card in for grading and it comes back as a 9, you've now lost even more money. Before, you'd be able to squeak that out and break even. You sent a $500 card in, let's just call it $50 to get it graded. A PSA 9 would sell for $575. You'd have seller fees. You'd lose a little bit, but not a ton on the transaction. Now you send a raw card in at $500, pay $50 to grade it and get it back. It might sell for $450, $425. And then now knock 10% off for the transaction fees, depending on where you sell. Now you've actually lost a decent chunk of change when you send it in to get grading at a 9. So you have to hit that 10. So that's another little angle here as well. Maybe someone just doesn't want to take that risk. They pull a silver Wemby. It's slightly off-centered. There's some light print lines on it. I'd rather just move it raw and take the $500, the bird in the hand, versus the unknown of sending it into a grading company and seeing what it might come back as, and then potentially lose or win. Maybe that $500, that's a big deal to them. They would rather just have that. Let someone else take the risk on it. Someone else might get that. They might look at it and say, you know what? I have way more experience grading. These print lines, they're faint enough. I don't think PSA will ding it. The rest of the card looks good. Or maybe they're going to Kurtz juice it. They're going to juice it up. Oh, yeah, there's something on there, but I could fix that. PSA won't catch it. SGC won't catch it. Beckett won't catch it. Let's send it into the upgrade shop, as Striker likes to say, and get that gem mint 10 grade. And then, I'm going to get it back and it's going to be worth double. Your success rate is then higher. Maybe you have a better eye for it. Whatever the case might be, you have some sort of edge to deploy. So the likelihood that ultra modern product just released clean raw card walks up to your table or walks up to you at trade night is much more likely on a Wemby silver or a Stroud silver than a Lucas silver. And then I think the other thing that happens too is, like we talked about with the PSA 9s versus 10s on the pop count, is some of this stuff sorts itself out. We begin to see, oh, you know what? It is harder to 10 this one particular card. As time evolves, a different picture is painted. We start to see a little bit more of it. Oh, okay, there is a print issue with this card. Oh, all silvers on, or all whatevers of this particular card in this particular year from this particular set. It's really hard to gem those. So 10s are going to get more of a premium versus a 9 versus raw, because it is way harder to grade that card. So you'll see some of that, but we don't know that right now. Now with Victor, just to pull this up as an example, and I honestly don't know, I didn't look. PSA 10s, there's 1,000. PSA 9s, there's 400. So this card is gemming at a much higher rate. Maybe that's part of it. Let's look at Stroud just to see if that's similar as well. PSA 9 at 1,100. PSA 10 at 1,000. So this one's balanced. And this one's still 2.2x. So maybe in the long run, this one is actually got a little bit room to separate a little bit more. Whereas the Wemby seems to be gemming way at a higher percentage rate. Maybe that one is going to keep a narrow gap between raw and a PSA 10 because it's easier to get a PSA 10 on it, thus increasing the supply on it. These are all things that we don't know right out the gate. This takes some time to sort itself out a little bit, like it has with, the 2019 Zion and Ja and the 2018 Luka. But regardless, if you pull a decent card today, the question of whether or not to grade it is more difficult than it has ever been, especially if it is a card of value. You got to really think about it now, because if it's on the fence at all, sending that thing in the grade is actually a losing proposition. Maybe I'll walk through for a separate video. I pulled that gold auto out of 50, and I kind of had a similar conversation with myself on whether I should grade it or not. But we'll save that for a future one. That's all I got for you, boys and girls. Curious for your thoughts, as always, down below. Have you noticed this, and has it impacted your decisions on grading, on should I grade it, should I not grade it? You know what? I'm just going to move this raw. Has your thought process around that whole conversation that you have with yourself, has that shifted over the last, let's just call it year, 6 months, maybe even less than that? That's all I got. Catch you boys and girls on the next one. Peace.